Friends will join us in the meantime. Are our presenters here? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone is here. Thank you very much. So for those who don't know me, I'm Monika Slomska, and I'm the president of HOA, and in private, I'm a managing director of the company called Knowledge Pyramid Kft. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you on today's Source to Pay Business Forum. And please note that this event will be recorded and obviously it will be shared on social media as well. That is why, if you don't feel convenient, please switch off your camera and set your mics on mute. And you will be able to raise your questions through the chat functions, but at the end of the sessions, there will be 4 presenters actually, and at the end of each session, you will be able to ask questions directly to the presenter if you would like to. So why we are talking today about source to pay, we think it is really important since in the changing world we are living in, there is a significantly more focus on business transformation initiatives. Source to pay area is a key one from this perspective. And we will spend around the next 2 hours or so sharing hands-on transformation and technology related information and also individual case studies. So we have 4 guests today and all are individually brilliant experts in their area. And I will introduce 3 of them briefly before their presentation takes place. But because event is powered by Doxis Business Solutions, that is why I would like to introduce our host of the event, Ákos Gergely. So Ákos, please, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Monika. It has been my privilege to power this source to pay event, actually to even invent it and introduce it into the HOA world back in 2016 in my first year of board membership. And I believe it proved to be a very good forum, well received by the HOA community over the years. As you may know, it's always difficult to renew it year on year, but I think this time it will be sensationally more and different than it used to be before. So thank you, Monika, for organizing it and helping me deliver this event.
Thank you very much, Ákos. And with that, let us move to our first presentation. I would like to introduce Miklós Manasiev. And a few words about Miklós. He's an expert in commercial and supply chain areas. And his practical and hands-on experience relates to various industries. He's possessing significant experience when it comes to sourcing procurement. And today he will share with us his interesting facts related to source to buy area in particular. And he will also share interesting case study. So Miklós, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Monika. Let me share my screen. And please confirm if you can see.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, okay. So thank you again, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Miklós Manasiev, and I'm here to talk about the source to buy process and some hands-on experiences over the years. Within this, I like to talk about the transformation of the sourcing from a transactional and technical business partnering to a business partnering and a strategic value-added function, and about the possible ways to adopt it into a shared service center or center of excellence environment. Starting with this, I like to put in bracket what is the end-to-end process and where the sourcing is in place in this, the source to buy. So the supply chain management end-to-end process contains several functions, including the planning, forecasting, sourcing and procurement, logistics, materials management, and accounts payable. In the sourcing area, we call it P2P. When it is more about the invoices, then it becomes an accounts payable activity. However, there are many transactional components within the supply chain that I highlighted here. Shared service centers historically focus on the accounts payable function delivered in the finance. And according to a recent HOA research, only 1% of the Hungarian shared service centers are working in the procurement area, while the purchase to pay is covered in more than 30% of the cases. I believe this is a great basis from which to build the service lineup. But for today, I will focus on the procurement process that is covering source to plan, source to contract, source to pay. The essence is in the time horizon. That's why we enlarge these two functions into sub-processes, because the more we move before the transactional activities, which is the P2P, the more added value can be created. In this regard, source to pay focuses on the next 3 to 5 years, source to contract on the next 2 to 3 years, and source to pay focuses on the activities within the 12 months, next 12 months. This is one hand where we can increase the value add in the process. The other part is that, as I mentioned before, in the end-to-end process, several functions are working together, like finance at the accounts payable part, but also corporate finance, treasury is in the scope with sourcing. Breaking down the silos between these functions can also create several benefits. As you know, data management and knowledge of the suppliers and the materials or services that are going to be sourced and a lot of money is going to be spent on, it's important that all of these invoices and information that is generated throughout the process is handled in a way that everyone can work out from that. But there's another example I can mention. For instance, the COVID pandemic situation put the cash in a pretty much extensive focus that with the cooperation between the functions can be reduced cooperatively by managing the days sales outstanding and the days pay outstanding as well. And thus, in this, if it is cooperatively managed in a correct way, because of this date management, we can reduce the required working capital. So how could we build up the service delivery in a shared service center of excellence environment? The standard approach can be used like the other functions, creating the service line from transactional up to an added value activities. So on the different tier levels, there are various questions being answered by sourcing, the what, how, and finally the why. So this is the tiered model that I brought to you, and I like to introduce you, which starts with the level 0. In here, the question is the what that sourcing is answering. Usually it's a self-service management with purchase cards and workflows is used, and the focus is on the approval and the cost management of the spend. This is the basis from where we move on and we start to answer the question, the how. So the level 1, tier level 1, provides a step further with purchase transactional activities to supply communication and alignment. The main benefits are the scaling effect and the efficiency, and thus operational cost reduction. On the level 2 is about issue resolution, is contracting. So here a lot of problems can be managed, and with this management in place, there are the previous level 1 colleagues can make this communication towards to the supplier and the business to solve the issues like freeway matching or non-available supply, or new supply is needed, and so on and so forth. The focus moves to reduce maverick buying, and purchase catalogs are created to control the buying activities. But still, the focus is on the cost and the risk management. And this is the next stage, the level 3, where we start answering the why question, why we are doing all of these things. On this level, sourcing starts to be a trusted business advisor and an expert to the business stakeholders. In this stage, answering specific business needs, for example, just in time, special delivery requirements, or innovations from suppliers that can bring growth or other opportunities to the business, or solves special problems of the business. As we transition toward from the lower tier levels to the higher levels, digitization and automation kicks in. And besides that, more data and analytics are created to move on a value-added services and advanced analytics while creating the capability and the capacity to achieve the higher level tiers. The tiered model that I'm showing here is perfectly aligning to maturity models, such as process maturity, lean maturity, local, global category management, digital maturity, etc. So you can find the right concept and the right setup for yourself to build the roadmap from tier 0 to tier 3. But you may ask, okay, sourcing achieves the tier levels and is going to be a supportive function to the business, but how is it going to be done there? I brought the N-shop matrix here, and the 4 strategies of the N-shop matrix, as you may know, the one is the market penetration. This focuses on increasing sales of existing products to an existing market. The product development, there we start focusing on introducing new products to an existing market. Market development, which is the strategy focuses on entering a new market using existing products. And finally, diversification, focuses on entering a new market with the introduction of a new product. I would mention here as well that the biggest risk is with diversification. So the N-shop matrix, as you know, gives you not just the strategy, where you want to go and how you want to build and grow your business, but also gives an indication how much risk you are going to take. Let's put procurement into this picture. So when procurement focuses on cost reduction and risk management, it can contribute to market penetration only. This is the less risky situation. And we are really focusing on lowering the cost of the OPEX and maximizing the margin for the business. But as we corporately unveil the business needs, the more we can shift focus from cost and risk management to other activities that are shown here under the highlights, which are much more strategic activities. So the 4 types of sourcing projects that can support the growth are, according to their impact on the business, are by impact, the cost structure impact, the demand impact, and the product, service, and brand impact. Usually, procurement organizations tend to use more familiar techniques in the demand and the buy impact segments. That means leveraging the spend, making competitive bidding, rationalize the supply base, and so on and so forth. And even for the most important spend categories, there is very occasionally more sophisticated techniques are used. So these neglected techniques are those that can deliver a greater value to the business for growth. So in this case, supplier sourced innovation, influence product service design, broker strategic alliances can be mentioned. So I would like to show you one possible way how to establish a sourcing value-added function and shared service center environment, following with 4 main pillars and its focus areas. The first is the assessment. Before we start to act on a project in sourcing, the actual maturity level of sourcing will define where the focus should be and which tools should be used. With a maturity assessment, a 360-degree assessment of the procurement function is done to generate roadmaps towards excellence. Next is risk assessment. It's very important, not just from seeing the broader aspect, but also to assess the suppliers itself. So this tool is used twice, but for different reasons. So there are key risks and dependencies relating to the procurement process, which have to be assessed and followed up internally and at the supplier level. The main review areas are people, reputation, operations, and financials. And you may identify control, action, optimization, or follow-up activities to be executed on the project. It's important because it gives you the focus and move on the analysis part, which contains all the tools that will generate the basis of sourcing focus and project execution. Here we have the spend analysis. How do we spend? Why we are spending? What we are spending? The spend is sorted and needs to be analyzed to define the category strategy, prioritize actions, and manage supply risk adequately. The supply strategy, with clear expectation on quality, cost, delivery, and innovation, what supply base is most appropriate and how the company will interact with its suppliers through a well-defined supplier relationship management. The KPIs and the performance reporting will help us define the future procurement savings and metrics that will be monitored and shared. An adequate IT enables to easily translate procurement performance into dollar impact on EBIT or EBITDA. Opportunities and project pipeline. Procurement project pipeline and maturity are highly correlated based on having a well-balanced project mix with three qualities: sophistication of procurement techniques, diversity of procurement techniques used, the time horizon for project payoff that needs to be near or long, and planned well ahead. The third element I brought here is the organization and talent management. So we know why we are doing these things. We identify the goals and how we are going to reach those, but we have the right organization in place and the right talent supporting this organization. The sourcing projects and tasks need to be aligned with the operational and organizational setup. The operational model will define who does what. So many of the cases, sourcing is collecting a lot of knowledge and managing this information from finance to legal and engineering. And this information needs to be conveyed towards to one goal. So what are the focus points and how this information, knowledge, and strategy transfer within the organization? The organizational alignment that usually starts from a decentralized then to a center-led or a hybrid organization or a centralized organization may have a kind of different approach according to the needs of the companies, but it has to be scalable to provide local support to operations and projects while achieving synergies on categories. The human capital evaluation and training, I realized is very, very important in sourcing. Everyone thinks it's an easy thing to buy computers, for instance, but it's much more knowledge that needs to be put in place from negotiation skills to, as I mentioned, finance or legal skills to ensure the results. And these necessary competencies are available at the appropriate level for each career path is something that needs to be designed and created for the results. And I put the fourth level is the supporting tools. Source to buy operation needs to be aligned to the business environment and supported with IT tools for best effectiveness and efficiency. Clear governance guides should exist regarding who has responsibility for policy development, monitoring, enforcement, and arbitration. Appropriate structures should be in place to provide these government functions. The sustainability is now becomes more and more important as we, even from the investment point of view, supporting the environment, the social, and the people part becomes more and more in focus. So how does the company plan to take account on its social, economic, and environmental responsibilities? Many of the cases, procurement can make a significant impact, like circular economy, sustainable goals, and CSR in focus that makes a difference. And as I mentioned previously, procurement IT tools beyond the basic ERP. So the enterprise resource planning is a great tool, but there are a lot of generic technology roadmaps designed to leverage analytics and big data to uncover new opportunities in the company spend. Also, we can talk about here robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, or machine learning that can help manage resources efficiency. Lastly, but not last, the stakeholder partnering is important. That sourcing and source to buy is always know what is the need of the business and the stakeholders. So I brought here two cases, and based on the time available, I will move on these. So let me show you how this framework was executed through a business example. The first case that I brought here is a manufacturing case with a situation of a manufacturing company with a 300 million USD annual spend with a high level penalty due to component availability and quality. So we used the 6 steps approach here that I already mentioned. The tools can be used for, and started with an evaluation of the actual situation with maturity matrix, self-assessment framework, maturity assignment grid, and procurement excellence roadmaps. And also the risks were considered. The risk assessment matrix, risk mapping charts helped us to identify that the communication to suppliers was challenging since this was a transition from abroad to Hungary to create a center of excellence manufacturing. The suppliers had the knowledge of the products being sourced, and they were the ones who knew the engineering part behind it as well. So that was one of the risks. The other part of the risk was whether the plant and the production will be built on time, whether the product availability, the price will be sufficient to move from supplier to an insourcing event. The global spend analysis and validation of strategy positioning for customers was done, and 7 categories were identified with 120 short and long-term sourcing projects, aligned a 3P hybrid organization, which is product, project, and procurement, together with supplier quality. So we created one source of contract towards to the supplier. And besides of the standard sourcing, make it reliable, make it cheaper, new KPIs were set up, like just in time and on time in full delivery, and product and project material productivity to support the business in availability of deliveries and also the margin productivity. So here the benefit was a 31 million euro saving potential identified, with a less than 10% emergency orders and 97% OTIF delivery. The other side of the case, you see a centralized MRO turnaround execution. Here the case, I will be a little bit shorter here because of the time. The process industry supplier had the problem that when they had to stop for maintenance, there was a high losses due to that the production couldn't restart it on time. So two new things had to be put in place. One, a new organizational and operational sourcing approach need to be put in place. So instead of having one strategic sourcing, the category management was moved out from strategic sourcing. Strategic sourcing started to work on the contracts and the procurement on the procure side. Next one, with engineering, there was an initiative to implement a new process, a planning process in which not at the time of the turnarounds, but much before the scope of work has been identified. And in this case, the sourcing execution could be done on time, reducing the supplier risk and the development, in this case, of the build-up. So the benefit here was a 2 million euro risk avoidance on an annual base, and the 12-day delay decreased to 2 days for the business, and the production availability increased by 1%. So all of this, I think that several ways we can define how sourcing can support the business, and creating a shared service center is can be more than wage arbitrage and productivity, but also business values can be created that in the business case you can put in there and achieve more than before. And with that, I reached the end of my presentation. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Miklos. So if there are any questions to Miklos, please feel free to ask. No, then we would move ahead, and we will move ahead to the next presentation, which, as you may already know, when it comes to successful transformation, technology plays a key role. And I would like to introduce our next guest, Hamish McKinney-Sharma from EY. Hamish leads procurement technology capability, and he's focused on end-to-end global implementations that provide clients with inherent procurement value. He's mainly focusing on complex category management and sourcing models and procurement assessments, large-scale technology implementations, for example, like SAP Ariba, Coupa, or other solutions. So Hamish, the stage is yours.
Hi, thanks very much, Monica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks very much.
And we can see your screen as well.
Great, wonderful. So afternoon, so I think afternoon is still the case for most of us. Just to get started, a little bit about me, and then 4 things to share with you. Probably, I see how many people are on the line. I wouldn't hesitate to ask questions if you've got them as we go through this, but just to share with you some perspective. So from my side, I've been with Ernst & Young for about 9 years, been in the procurement domain for over 20, with a heavy influence on technical delivery and also how we digitize procurement, how we get the most out of the procurement function to its customers. So wanted to start off with some bigger questions, what I call the things that I'm hearing in the market and what people are talking about. Where is procurement going? Then a little bit about where it's come from and a bit more meat around that and some examples before I get into what are the providers in the market and what are some of the nuances between your core providers, some of the innovators out there as well. It's a dynamic environment, a lot changing constantly. And then at the end, a little bit about how we approach this. So I know Monica will keep me honest if there's any questions, so do bring them in. Okay, so some big questions here. I think let's just go through these. In terms of the top left, so predictive analytics and cost and quality management. So we have definitely moved into the space where understanding my spend and how much is being spent on what is kind of interesting, but not actually providing what we need as an industry out there. So the big focus now is on how can you help me as a procurement function drive technology that thinks about where is my spend going in the future? What am I likely to do? If I change a component, like was spoken about just now, how does that help and change and ripple into my supply chain? So predictive analytics, big focus. And there are tools out there that are helping to try and drive this, but you still need a good grounding in some degree on the analytics. The second one, cost and quality management. So it kind of means to me, we still have to get the basics right in the world of procurement. So, cost is a very important factor, but do we compromise on quality? Maybe for some goods, less so on others. So cost and quality management still is at the sort of cornerstone on that. The top right, some things that we're hearing in the market here. So creating a modern supply base, a supply base that can live through a pandemic, a supply base that when you throw a major event at it, it's still able to achieve an outcome. A supply base that when you look at sustainment, not just as using the word, but actually living and breathing sustainment and sustainability as a part of what procurement does is really a big focus, whilst maintaining long value. Bottom left, so in the world of procurement, I have a third tier supply chain. How do I make sure I connect better with those suppliers and ensure I get a focus on really the outcome, which means managing risk? How do I manage risk proactively without reading about something in the papers of one of my suppliers, making sure I'm able to see that information quickly as a contract or category manager and do something about it. And in the bottom right, some of the things that are really surfacing even more in 2021 is I want to see more innovation that's connected to my ecosystem, that gives me the foundation, but allows me to move quicker, whether that's through automation or differently. And how do I make sure my workforce that sits underneath this is a workforce that's fit for success, particularly in the world of making sure it has the right talent, the right skills. Procurement used to be a big focus, 15 years ago, used to be a big focus on following a process. Yes, fine. Procurement now has to go into the new world, which is around facilitating every different aspect of what is bought and goods and services across the business. So those are some of the things that we're faced with, and how do we start to knit those together and build off those, I think is really important, because many of you on the call will be attacking this in different angles and will be on a different maturity based on what you have as an organization. So just again, a reflection, and then I'm going to land on the right-hand side of this, but our ability to consume information quickly, socially, might be good, but how quick are we digesting and consuming information that's relative to how our businesses are operating with our supply chain? So look, some really interesting numbers up there that we've seen, right? So every 35 days, there's a critical mass that's being met. So, the pace is quickening. And I would have said personally that COVID last year made that really, really sort of, hard for some organizations to digest. I was working with some organizations and they were in a position where, they were having to keep some of their third parties alive because of the experiences they were going through, but they had to make sure they were getting what they needed from those suppliers. A huge amount of risk that was sort of channeled. Look at a couple of the others. Ecosystems, connecting with ecosystems. So how do we make sure simple things from buying and getting our goods and services in the organization are connecting with suppliers, but doing things in an innovative, user experience, rich feel? So, connecting systems and connecting devices is really quite a big thing right now. And then what I think this means for procurement, kind of three things. So our experience as procurement professionals, whether that is in the sourcing space, the contract management, or even in the buying space, let alone our suppliers, is very different. And it means that we need more information available to us. We want to do things quicker. We want to buy in some of the, the 2 or 3 clicks, and my job is done. We need to make sure that we are driving compliance across procurement, so end users are actually able to buy what they need quickly to serve the business. And then the third one is constantly challenging how we do things in procurement. Being flexible and being agile to be able to support not just technical deployments of this into the business, but how suppliers want to innovate with us and how suppliers want to collaborate with us. So again, some of this will be relative to how we work outside of business. Some of you will be sort of on this, but I think it's a good reflection to say we have to be able to switch and flip our capability. So sort of in summary, a couple of things on the left-hand side. So cost pressure doesn't go away, but I call this getting even. As an organization out there, if your focus is cost, that's great, but competitors and peers are actually focusing beyond that. So it's a 101 for me. It's getting to the hygiene factors and beyond. The second one is, how do we make sure we can sustain procurement and supply chain in the world that we're shaping now? So thinking about sustainability and some of the ESG aspects that are presented to organizations, and making that rich enough. So I think someone might be, someone's asking a question, or if they're on mute.
Can you please set your mics on mute, everyone?
No
Thank
problem.
You very much.
Just type the question in the chat if need be, if you're struggling. On number 2 is being cognizant of what is the change in dynamics in the market. And one of them right now continues to be the big focus on ESG and how, take energy or utilities and consumer products is having a big flavor on how we consider, the bigger picture in terms of how procurement can make an impact. The third one, so as we continue to grow globally, small and large organizations, how do we make sure that we're meeting the dynamics of goods and services being used across boundaries? How do we make sure we understand local requirements when you're rolling out solutions, but also making sure that people have got access to information that may be regulatory in nature? And then the fourth one, what if another risk impact is dropped in? How agile and how resilient are we at being able to do that? There's a big focus right now on automation, and whether it's self-cleaning data or self-fulfilling supply chains, it's about systems talking to systems, which fundamentally might be off the back of scripts or very clear logic, but organizations are very focused on connecting ecosystems to drive down less self-service and to drive down, so there's a focus really on what's important. And I've picked 4 on the right that I think are helping shape where procurement is going. Number 1 is that predictive focus. So really thinking about how predictive analytics can help drive our procurement strategy and operation strategy. Do I need to switch things if I was outsourcing them before, insourcing and so forth? What is it that I really need to focus on, help drive a cost comparator? The second one, how do I get more savvy about my category activities and driving autonomous thinking into category and spend management, so that I'm able to focus on not just the market intelligence, but what are the different ways that I could source, contract, or buy those categories that are being looked at from a very innovative perspective. So really thinking about what are the new solutions in the market there. The third one, so contracts and fulfillment and obligations, making sure those are met but also making sure that that those are not missed. So where there are contracts in place, driving the ability to buy off contract and making sure our business is conforming to that, but also if there are penalties or clauses, not waiting till the contract is at the end, making sure those are a part of the journey of the contract itself, and folding any risk considerations into that. And then the last one here on the right is really about making sure that you've got a workforce that's connected to the market, a workforce that's connected internally on the demand within organizations, and really helping shape and collaborate the two together. Definitely seeing more collaboration cross suppliers and the ability for people to openly put innovation into RFPs and opportunities. So, that 3 to 5 years is coming down. That's like 2 to 3 years, if that. So the shape is changing in terms of where procurement is moving. So lots of detail here, but what we're seeing is that number 5, the maturity of procurement for those pushing the boundaries are on a number of things. So the first one there, self-service buying, this is very much focused on, as it says, right, really ensuring people that are buying in the organization, whether it's goods or services, they're given every opportunity to do it by themselves, but within the guidelines of what procurement have set out. So yes, automation, yes, it's allowing and driving compliance, but it's also giving behavioral change so that individuals can adjust how they buy based on preferred suppliers, and procurement can remove those, adjust those, but ensure that there is a big focus on channeling the spend to where we need it to go. That also comes with the user experience, and I think we'll all recognize there are different users in procurement, whether that is category focus for procurement, contract managers, the buying business out in the organization, accounts payable and suppliers. That user experience really needs to have a focus on doing things quickly, but with informed insight. So you don't want to go through 10 clicks to buy something. You need to do it immediately. And I think the most recent thing I've seen is using, whether it was MS Teams or Zoom, to create the requisition that goes into the actual product itself and returns the requisition number. So there's a big focus right now in terms of trying to drive minimized involvement from the user, providing a heavy self-service that conforms to all the policies and procedures in place that you would want to drive your spend. Just picking up on a couple of the others. So the centralized platform, it's not just about technology here, right? It's making sure that we are building a base where suppliers can reactively adjust what they need to provide, use technology to have some smart ways to invoice and innovate, as well as driving a focus on technology which is additive to your ERP or some of the cloud products out there. So there are lots of, and I'll share some in a minute, there are lots of innovative tools out there, but actually just dropping it in isn't the answer. It's really about how does that ripple in your process, in your adoption, and what is the benefit you're really getting is sort of putting that in, whether you're one country or a 70+ country organization. I think the bottom two are interesting. I think the performance management continues to be an area of I don't think we've exhausted that in its fullest potential. So particularly when you look at some of the tools, a lot of people are dragging and pulling information from suppliers' performance, from the ERP, from some of the cloud technology, and creating a dashboard with an experience for procurement is still an area of continued focus. So I'm definitely seeing, dashboards changing, but using KPIs in a dynamic way. So you'll have your executive KPIs, your operational KPIs, and then maybe some tactical KPIs, but making sure that we can adjust those based on where the focus is for procurement and operations. So dashboards exist, but they're not necessarily what I would call standard or existing in products. They're things that have kind of been built over time, but having the flex to move those KPIs around, I think is really, really quite powerful. And then this bottom one, I touched on it earlier. I think this is really quite powerful. So if I have an event and I've got a second tier supplier who is sort of 90% of their revenue is driven to one of my main suppliers, if they have a financial issue or if they have a geographical issue or they're no longer able to provide the services as planned, I want to know that as soon as possible. I don't want to find out about it after the event. So, you know, there are some of the core products out there do look at how suppliers are performing and feed that into a dashboard type view, which then allows you to do something about it. So you may not have all the information, but you're certainly seeing that that supply might be at risk, and it allows you to try and look at what is the alternative. Do I need to switch? Do I need to help the supplier? And so forth. So really the takeaway here is, depending where you are in your maturity of procurement, a big focus right now is around automation, digitizing as much of the source to payment process, linking it to supply chain, and definitely not treating technology as the answer, but treating it as a big enablement to try and drive focus on where insight is being driven from. So quite a bit here, but hopefully that's the takeaways. Now, sort of 7 things that are also being talked about, just to share those with you. So just walking from the left to the right, and then I'll share a bit more about the market. So digitally embedded capabilities here. So this is very much around, you know, how do I make sure that the capabilities of source to pay are being driven off the back of some of the emerging technologies. I talked about creating a requisition without logging into the system, knowing who you are and where you sit in the ecosystem, but really making sure that the capability is driven across sourcing contracts and source to pay. But that's only going to work if you have some underlying data that's rich enough. And I think there is always the question of, if I've got poor data, how can I make that happen? That there are some tools which will help predict, you know, even with poor data, what the data should be showing, but you do need a reference point in order to be able to get something out of that. So when you look at integrated or enabled source to pay excellence, that's very much focused on you know, connecting within the organization and externally to get the most out of the process. I think the third one here, services orientated. So thinking here of procurement fundamentally as the service, a little bit was mentioned earlier, but what is it that we are providing to our customers and our supply base? How effective are we? How are we measuring procurement to procurement and ensuring that actually it's not just about supply and demand, but it is also about, are we providing the right experience and the portfolio of procurement services to our business, and giving suppliers the opportunity to really drive collaboration and innovation. I mean, I think we're only just touching the veneer of collaboration and innovation when we look at digitizing activity with suppliers, and more to be done, but the focus is around procurement as a service. The fourth one, so when we talk about enhancing the buying behavior, this is very much that user experience. Lots of organizations getting into the field of creating a layer of user experience that sits across the tools and the applications. And it's important because ultimately we don't want the user to not be doing the right thing for the business, using the preferred supplier, making sure we're aligned to a contract that's operationalized, so that it gives a much more informed performance view of what we're buying to procurement. 6 and 7, just taking those together. So when we talk about ESG and sustainability, it's really important that we have an understanding as a procurement function, what it is that we're trying to achieve. You know, it's not just about necessarily ISO standards, it's really about making a demonstrable difference to our business and those that we engage with in terms of how we use energy and how we go about sustaining our footprint. So I think those two, if you're not in that space, that is a space that will continue. And for any outsourced arrangements, I would be seeing that as a KPI moving forward. Okay, a couple more things to share with you. So a very busy slide. What I would say here is This is absolutely not exhaustive, but the three components here, when we look at the technology in the market across source to pay, you have those that we probably all know in some respects are those enabled by the ERP, the technology that's born themselves from a traditional environment, whether that be plant maintenance or buying, sourcing, etc. However, they are still part of the cornerstone of how many of the organizations that we have on the call or that you work with drive activity across source to pay. You then have the bottom left, where very established organizations are driving really rich RPA activity and pushing automation to really, automation talking to automation. And I think this is amazing, whichever one of those products you call out. If you're not in this space, you absolutely should be in this space because this is about driving efficiency and effectiveness, but opportunity to see how you could enrich core products. And then the one on the right becomes the minefield. So people might gravitate to an SAP Ariba or a Coupa on Evalua, but there are also many, many niche products across the source to payment process, which demonstrate, richness. And I'm only using these for examples, right? Seal is a contract management rich solution, which could be overlaid on some of the others. Some of the others around invoice track, use invoice blocks, very much focused on AI and automation around smart invoicing, as are many of the others. But it's how do we use those based on the structure of the organization? So, I suspect some of the people on the call will have a lot of these products, and we've touched the products. But when you look at some of the tier one players that cover source to pay, whether it's Coupa, Ariba, Evalua, and Medius and others, some of the bigger differences are around the integration that you might need across the landscape, the user experience and how that is managed effectively and quickly, the access to the third-party supply base, and so on. And it's really, we look at these as an organization as to, there is no one size that's perfect, but taking into consideration what your estate may be, your procurement technology estate, and the big focus around some of the automation and where you want to go as a procurement function. I think these lend themselves to that. There can be a couple of options. But again, those are illustrative. I would definitely call out integration, speed to scale, speed to benefit, the supply network, and also, the user experience is probably one of the big ones for me. So there may be some questions here, which happy to come to. I did want to just share a couple of things. We, as an organization, we have a bit of a maturity assessment on how we look at technology and how we go through that, whether that is part of a quick scan, an advanced scan, or a full scan. But it really looks at organizations in terms of a deep dive and how well scaled an organization is to meet the future challenges of procurement. But what I would say is, from a procurement and technology perspective, I mean, that's all very well, but thinking about it from how you use that technology and how ready the business is to transform is really part of the answer as well. So I'll pause there, I think, unless there's any questions. I'm happy to take some later, but I will hand back to our colleagues who are running the session.
Hamish, this is Dori speaking from Albemarle. Thank you very much for the very, very detailed insight, and I think it's pretty useful information. My question would be that as we have really the luxury to have more and more products on the market where source to pay included AP can really make a difference towards the supplier and to the business, how do you see how we can keep engaged our stakeholders and employees within the company as we will bring more and more technology into the process?
So, lovely question. And there's no bullet answer, right? I think let's put it on the table. So first of all, thank you, Teresa, for the question. I think what's important here is when we talk about world-class procurement, and I haven't used that language, but if we say world-class procurement, when I've talked to industries, they've always said, oh, that's one technology. So I would turn it on its head and almost say there are technologies we should be looking at to make sure we understand, can we bolt them on, and is there no ripple effect or no risk if we do that? But I would also say world-class procurement isn't about 20 different technologies. I think we got to make sure that we're driving efficiency on the back end, on the accounts payable side, as well as the user end. So to come back to your question, deploying technology, and it's a bit of a marketing and a statesman-like approach to how you deploy this into an organization for me. So I think we need a view on the end goal, but we also need to be sympathetic and get to those users. I call them the grumpy users. I hope that's okay. But those users we know that have a lot of interest and buy a lot to help shape the direction. So that doesn't mean choosing all the technology, but what is a good user experience for company X will be a completely different user experience for company Y. And some people will want more freedom of choice. Some people will just say, tell me who the two preferred suppliers are. That's all I need to know. So I think one aspect here, the two takeaways, one aspect here is be clear on the ripple effect and try and avoid too much ripple effect or too much technology too quick. Try and bed some in so you've got a good case of user stories. The other one is the supplier involvement. It continues to get forgotten, and supplier enablement can be an absolute bane for a lot of people. And to some degree it is, but I think we need to be harnessing suppliers from day one so that they are involved in enabling quicker, whether that is, just purely catalog or something more advanced, because the supplier journey, frankly, for me, is part of the puzzle. So those are kind of the two things: avoid too much ripple effect and keep suppliers involved from day one, because until we've got the most amount of suppliers on, there's still a little bit of it's a ripple effect of pain to some degree. Long answer. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. It absolutely makes sense.
Any other question? No? Then thank you very much, Hamish.
Thank you.
And we will move to our next presentation. So we've heard a lot about technology, which is playing a key role in successful transformation. But I think we all know execution plays equally important role in such initiative. And with this, I would like to introduce our next guest, Marcus Martens from EY. Marcus is a very experienced transformationer with broad international experience as well, holding various roles in finance. And Marcus is a very experienced expert in procure-to-pay area. So he will share with us interesting best practices related to transformation in this field. So Marcus, the stage is yours.
Now finding the unmute button. Technology is still providing problems and still not completely adapted to it after 2 years of using it. So thanks for having me. Thanks everyone. Monica, thanks for the kind introduction. My name is Marcus Martens, as Monica was mentioning. I am extremely passionate about P2P, and my career allowed me to go through all life cycles, from operation to transformation, including implementation and solution design of various P2P processes. My body has a lot of scars. I'm going through this, so there's a lot of lessons learned, and I'm pretty sure that everyone who is in that space has similar feelings about driving change within P2P. But before I want to start, right, my previous speakers, I think they have provided fantastic insights about the developments in the past years about what's possible in P2P. Looking back in the last 20 years ago, there was absolutely no ability to centralize P2P processes, and the technology support enablement was meager. With the development of the technology, the speed of the internet, and the availability of data and market intelligence, the opportunities are pretty much endless, right? Now the question is, if it's being laid out so easily, why is not everyone adopting to it, and why is not everyone getting the benefits? And unfortunately, the reasons are always boiling down not to the technology solution, not to the IT solution, the application, the RPA, but it boils down to the organization itself. So before I want to start, I kind of want you to paint a little picture. Imagine you're the Ministry of Infrastructure and Traffic, and you're representing a small country which has basically a mediocre traffic infrastructure. Your streets are in rather bad conditions. The maximum speed you can do with a decent car is 80 kilometers an hour. Your big cities are barely connected, while you have a central position in Europe, and all the other countries would love to access you as a market. Now, you're going to go on a conference and somebody tells you the opportunities of a transformed infrastructure. So what you're doing is, because you have the money, you're going to hire the best civil engineer and civil planner, and you're going to lay out the best plan for the newest infrastructure in your country. You're going to immediately contract construction companies. You get to work, right? You're immediately putting out a couple of high-speed highways where basically there are no speed limits, and your cities are connected. You're implementing roundabouts everywhere to take out all the traffic lights which have been slowing down the traffic, and you're going to make sure that your citizens have great high-powered cars to increase the speed in which business can flow. Now, overnight, you're turning on all this infrastructure. Now imagine what happens. Suddenly, everyone who used to go with 60, 70 on a highway is now sitting in a high-powered car. They used to have one lane, now they have 3 lanes. So everything sounds great. The reality is there will be accidents every day. Why? Because people don't know how to use it, because it sounds all so great and provides all these great opportunities. But unfortunately, there are all these tools without really guidance, without somebody knowing why we need this. Why, I can drive 130, let me drive 180. Right? I can drive 180, well, it ends up against a wall. So in digital transformation, unfortunately, often follows the same kind of picture. Often somebody is learning what is possible, right? The art of the possible learns what is possible. All the value that can be created through new technologies and new trends in an organization. There are software providers which have an amazing track record, and there is new innovation every day to unleash the supply chain, to help an organization to grow at a faster speed than they ever imagined. Now, until that, they got the consultants and they're reading about it. Now, where it stops is the pages after the technology. How to make it successful. And while my passion is for technology, today I will talk about the non-technological stuff. And their digital transformation follows the same story as any other transformational story. If you drive transformation in your organization, not surprisingly, 75% based on the information we receive, undertaking do not meet the project objectives. The project objectives may be reducing cost in the operational cost in supply chain, improving reducing the risk of your supply chain, creating a better user experience, reducing cycle time and fulfillment, driving deflation in your spend, etc., etc. So some of the key reasons, and I'm sure you can all sympathize with this, are the lack of the vision of the people, right? So leadership may understand why it's It has to be done. But the users who are used to do it in a different way for the last 20 years, they will also have to know, why is the reason to change? Why do we today need to work differently? The leadership, right, is not aligned. In supply chain and in P2P, there's usually more than one leader who's critical to success. We're talking about potentially the chief procurement officer or the sourcing leader. We're talking about IT. We're talking about finance. We're talking about COO, operations, and all these have to work together. Today, though, each of these organizations has different KPIs. They measure themselves differently. They all work in their own processes they've been used to work in the last 20 years. Often when we're doing transformation on the digital side, we're also changing the narrative of how the work is being done on a daily basis. But we are expecting that the people who who are used to drive a car with a maximum speed of 60 km/h tomorrow are able to do the same as twice the speed, with a lot of buttons in the cockpit and a lot of functionalities they may have never been seen and don't necessarily understand how to use it, right? Also, nobody has been monitoring the change in an external environment. We're talking, when it comes to transformation, we talk usually we're inside in perspective, which means this is going to be an IT project, which we're implementing in our organization. But as Hamish was pointing out, the benefit comes from the external environment, your suppliers. Supply chain P2P is really the value comes through the interaction with the suppliers. And so suppliers often are being left outside, or it's expected, well, it will come if we call. And by the way, I think I have a little bit extra time because we're good in time. So if you don't want to hear me talking so much, just ask a question and I will stop. So now a little bit as an example of something you all may relate to. Let's imagine an Ariba implementation, which I'm using end to end as an example for lesson learned on an implementation. Now, if you're implementing Ariba is a wide suite, but let's assume you're using the majority of the functionalities from sourcing to AP to supplier lifecycle management, and what you're really looking for is driving efficiency in your end-to-end process, reduce your cost in the AP side, reduce your cost on the PO transactions, increase the quality of your entire process, the transparency, data you're going to work with, much faster cycle times, faster in your collaboration with the supplier, getting the POs faster there, getting change orders faster, and better have them updated in your system, and ultimately reduce those cycle times of fulfillment as well. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's about cost savings and the engagement with the supplier. So, and this is usually what's being pitched. And after the third bullet, people stop reading. You know why you want to do it, you want to improve it. But then usually what do you need to do in order to accomplish it, right? The changes you need to make, Hamish was mentioning, the master data maintenance, as a supplier integration, the standard processes, right? Those things which are really hard to do outside of the IT world, may be forgotten 3-4 months after in the project end, and ensuring that you bring your entire organization with what you're seeing on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, too often forgotten because it is expensive. It is much more expensive than what people often assume, right? Because if you're trying to bring across an entire supply chain organization end to end with people who may be directly in the organization, but also many, many people who are not directly in the organization, requesters of indirect buy, for example, spot buy, people who are just in the field calling somebody and want to quickly buy something to service a product out in the field. it's a huge undertaking. So it may become overwhelming. So let's focus on the IT part of the entire project, because that's what most leaders feel comfortable to control. Now, in recent projects, we were surveying some lesson learned from a change management perspective, and I love this, because in most of the projects, you're going in and say, like, so here's what you need on the IT side, here's what you need on the operational side, and here is what you need on the change management side. And this is what each buckets are costing you. Guess which bucket is being cut out the first, but has the biggest impact on the success of the entire project? It's mostly not the IT part. It's usually always the change management part, because the value of change is very hard to quantify up ahead of a project. You only see the value of change if you have not done it, and you're wondering why you don't get all the benefits of your project. Now, some of the lesson learned, and I'm not going to read out of this. You will have access to social media on this session. You can read through this. But some of the main factors I want to put people's attention to is the first one, as I mentioned, there is a wide organization to be included in the change. It has to be top down and bottom up. Top down meaning the key leadership, different leaderships in touching P2P have to be aligned, which are usually at least the CFO, the CPO, and the COO, but then also bottom up, all the people who are touching this process need to be engaged. One way of doing it, for example, before you start a project, you will have something like a change management office. Okay, it doesn't need to be an official change management office. It can be part of the PMO. That can be the role for a sourcing program leader whose role is to drive change. Important is you gotta have a function, a person whose job it is to ensure that you're having a change strategy. Mapping, as Hamish was saying, you map your stakeholders. You know who's supportive, who is maybe less supportive. Who are the heavy users who can help you to drive change from inside because they're viewed as role models in the organization in that field. You should look at this and basically tailor a strategy based on these groups from a change management perspective. The second, if you're implementing a new workflow system, right, and basically you say, well, we will only have one way of buying things in the future, so people are going to use it because there are no other options. Meaning, if you build it, they will come. They're going to use it. Now, surprisingly, many employees and people in companies are extremely creative to find the way of working the old way, because you cannot completely cut out people from calling a supplier and with whom they have been working for years, and basically based on the trust contract with them. And then later on, you wonder why things don't work, right? So you will have to hold hands. You will have to identify what it takes for people to use these new processes. You will have to make persona journeys in order to understand how do they work today and how do you want them to work tomorrow, right? The other thing is, as I was saying, change is difficult, right? And you're expecting, you have an organization, and that existing organization, they will have to deal with the change, right? So we have a few people in our organization from which I say, from tomorrow on, I want you to be responsible for the change on top of your daily job. Now the question is, do they have the capacity to drive the change in the organization? One, and two, do they have the capability to drive the change? Do they have the influence? Do they know how they can bring along the other people, right? And do they have time for it? Most of the time, this is being done on top of the day-to-day business. So it always falls short, and organizations are heavily underestimating the need and the investment they have to do in their human resources to drive such change, right? And as I was mentioning, the last one is behavior. What you're really going to change if you're implementing, or if you're doing a digital transformation, you implement a new system, is you're going to change the way people work. You're not going to implement new features. You're not going to implement new IT, new services. You're going to change the way people work. And that is a massive undertaking on so many levels. And you cannot start early enough to bring the people on the journey through communication, so making sure that they understand the why it's important that we need them to change. And also, obviously, then Henry said, identify your resistors. Those people who are important for the success, however, are least likely to participate in that change.
Marcus, this is Doris speaking. First of all, it's very good to see and hear you presenting here. Can I have a question here?
Sure. Please do.
What is your view around the exceptions? So having a change management and having a very nice tool in place, it's good. And I can imagine the situation that we have this project management office or a change agent in the organization who can drive the behavior, and the users will come that, okay, I like this, but it won't work because of this exceptional process, or it won't work because it never worked, and it won't work because of this and this and that. How you would approach this situation when all of these historical anecdotes would come if we are talking about change?
You know, that's one of my favorite questions. You know that very well, and thank you.
No, I didn't know that though.
And it's very true. So when you're designing processes and you're going to change, people usually like to design the perfect process. The perfect process for what they believe is how the business transactions the business wants and should be seen. When you're though looking into your reality, you find that there are more than just the standard transactions, the exceptions you mentioned, and then business leader may say, oh, we don't want these exceptions, so we want people to work in it, ignoring basically that the exception exists and trying to force people into the process. This is as you were mentioning, that is a failure. The first thing is, from my perspective, acknowledge that exception exists. Try to understand how what your exceptions are in the organizations. There are tons of data mining tools out there that can help you to visualize the exceptions in the exception process in the organization. And then the last one, make sure that you're capturing the most of the exceptions, and you're going to have a strategy behind this exception, which means either you have a good process to fix these exceptions, or you acknowledge exceptions and include them in your standard processes with a goal that potentially later on you're still going to change it. The worst case scenario is you ignore the exceptions, and that always leads to failure.
Got you. Thank you so much.
Now, and thank you for the segue, because basically, if we're thinking about the transformation goals of the company, which are often linked, there's a reason why we want to do a transformation and digital transformation. It's not because we do want to always have the newest tools. I'm sure that some people make the decision based on this, but the majority of leadership is making decisions based on supporting the company strategy, the growth targets, the change of the business model, and their ability to innovate on the market. Supply chain is critical in supporting these goals by developing and finding the right suppliers, making sure they're timely supporting the operations, and supporting a very fast go-to-market with the supply chain. Supply chain, as we've learned in the last 20 years, is one of the most fragile parts of the entire organization. It can be disrupted so easily. So from that perspective, it's super critical to make sure that your transformation is part of the transformation goals of the company. And there are 4 key levers I already alluded to. The first one is really your organization, the entire organization. And my advice there is you will have to have organizational KPIs. You have to have a way to express objectively what success is, measure what matters. With new technology, you have the ability to measure your processes and define KPIs which are going across the entire organization. And make sure that there's accountability across all key stakeholders towards the KPIs. One of the, and I know many can resonate is, one of the worst thing is if you want to implement e-invoicing in order to reduce your cost per invoice. And for that, you want to have sourcing, implement and tell the suppliers that they should participate. However, your sourcing organization is measured only on deflation and pay terms. If you think about your organization, you have to make sure you're creating KPIs that align the organizations behind your transformational goals. The second one is human resource. Make sure, do you have the right people? Do you have the right skills and the talent already in your organization today to lead the transformation of tomorrow, to work the way you need to work tomorrow? Can you train your people, or do you need to bring in new talent? It's one of the most critical questions to ask before you go into a transformation. The third one, and I leave technology very to the last, is your processes. As I was alluding to Dori just a minute ago, is how do you want to make sure that people have global standard processes? Because today still standard processes is what you need to maximize the potential for automation. Every day though, there's technology coming out which makes it a little bit easier for you and is able to handle more exceptions through AI. However, if you want to today still get the maximum out of your process automation, you still need to pursue standard processes. What the future will bring, we don't know. Today, standard processes are the golden standard. And the last one is really technology. And when we talk about technology, we really have to remember technology is a means to an end. It's an enabler. It is not the reason why we do this. The reason why we do this is because we need to change in the organization and we want to support a company strategy. But it's not the strategy to implement more technology. So make sure that you understand which are the goals your company has set and which technology will best support these goals and in optimizing your organizational capabilities. And if there are no more further questions, then I'm coming to the last one. And this is a typical and proven framework in EY we're using to kind of try to bring this change in the organization. And it's probably a familiar cycle in first establishing the reason for change. Why is there the reasons for change? Then once you're at the leadership level, are aware of why you need to change. Make sure you understand everyone who has to change, what is their needs? If you don't understand their needs from their perspective, it's very, very difficult to instill the need for change in them, right? Then you can develop a strategy and think about what is the impact the change is going to have to your organization, and include them into the model future. Include the people who are being subject of the change in designing the future. The best way of changing people is allowing them to be part of the change, not just instilling the change on them. And then we have the execution piece, right? Where when we go into execution, we're going to get first the organization behind the future, right? Making sure that your future organization design is supporting it. Often what we do, we implement digital tools which completely change the way we're working, but we're forgetting to adjust the organization and the organizational structure to the new way of working. An organization needs to be prepared. It cannot be done with a hammer. Give them time and brings them on a journey along the change, right? Best practices are start small and then build it up. You're making a major change globally without the capability to lead that, you are most definitely going into disaster. Make sure you have as I mentioned, the capability and the capacity to support this. Drive it from inside out. And then you go back into the circle because this change will continue. It's a loop. Make sure you have the capability to sustain the change and make it part of your journey as the technology will continue to evolve. With that, open for if there are any more questions. Otherwise, thank you for everyone's attention.
Yeah, looks like there are no more questions. So thanks a lot, Markus. And we move to our next and final presenter, our host, Ákos, who is the founder and managing director of DocSys Business Solutions. So he will talk about even more interesting topic, if there is any more interesting topic on the top of what we already talked about, is about source-to-pay automation and automation from a digital perspective, digital outsourcing solutions when it comes to source-to-pay area. So Ákos, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Monica. Please confirm you are hearing me right. Can you hear me?
We are hearing you.
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, super. Thank you.
Yes, we can. Yes. Go ahead.
I couldn't agree more with everything told before me. Building on that, I will come up with a different perspective through the eyes of a solution provider. And I can assure you that the experiences we have in implementing such technologies or outsourcing projects, we've seen many things that we can conclude and probably help you when you will be doing the same thing in your company. As an agenda, I will very briefly introduce myself and the company I work for, and then I will jump into the subject, which has practically two aspects. One aspect is about source-to-pay more and more becoming a cloud platform, taking probably any of the companies from Hamish's presentations right upper corner. And that has a business impact on every organization, whether it's a customer or a solution provider, implementation provider company. Also, there is a growing demand that we see in one part of this source-to-pay process, which is actually the invoice processing part, which is viewed as a transactional, relatively low value add part of the process. Still, the pandemic showed everyone how difficult that can become in case you have either insourced or outsourced it to regions where the pandemic hit the working and workplaces very badly. And then last but not least, I will just summarize in one slide how can a mid-sized company like DocSys actually add value to any of your companies should you start implementing any of these solutions. About myself, very briefly, I started in an American multinational company called Xerox. Sales and marketing roles I had, but I had the opportunity to work on projects in the early outsourcing days in Hungary. These were projects mainly in the printing side of the business. However, in the 2000s, mid-2000s, when I started my own company, we faced the other side of it. The first side was how we put information on paper, That was the Xerox World and outsourcing project. The second part, which is lasting ever since I started like 15 years ago, that is, how do we capture information from documents that were either printed or are not structured data containing documents. And as the second part, you can see quite many shared service centers, business support centers that were doing projects in this area, and I could be lucky enough to take part of it. And as well as my work, I have some professional and social responsibility roles, one of them being a member of the board at HOA since 2015. And I have also some work that I overtook in the Hungarian Tennis Association's officiating committee. Maybe I will give you one flashback towards the end of the presentation to this idea. Okay, business solutions that we do, although many people view us as an IT provider. We started as an IT provider, delivering on-premise projects with Basware and Top-Image Systems, which in the meantime got acquired by Kofax for data capture. But then more and more demand came from large companies, actually a lot of them being shared service centers for outsourcing or cloud implementations. And as the world moved towards the cloud-based solutions from the on-prem solutions, our role as an IT systems integrator is turning more and more into technology consulting specialists, integration specialists, and outsourcing service providers. We have a pretty global reach, although I should not claim that we are larger than life. We are a 50 people company with about 3 million euro turnover. Still, our services are reaching out through the local, Central Eastern Europe based shared service centers into US and Asia, Europe being the natural base. Our partnerships for nature, they are very long-term and mutually beneficial business partnerships where we can provide rather bigger flexibility than some of the large corporations, global companies in the same domain. Okay, jumping into the subject. Why do we speak about this? Because of the experience we collected, we see that these cloud solutions, which SAP Ariba and Basware are also based on, are generating some changes in the business environment that may cause some issues or opportunities maybe in going forward should a shared service center become the center of excellence and the driving power behind the technology implementation. Also, I will show you what is the growing demand or the engine behind the growing demand for nearshored outsourcing services in the area of data capture, and how that data capture is different today than it used to be 10 years ago or even more. Okay, well, why are source-to-pay projects becoming more and more global? The way we saw that was local operations companies, and we know that there are many global players who have local operating companies in Hungary or in Central Eastern Europe, used to have their ERP systems, and in many cases those ERP systems were separate from the global ERP infrastructure. Not in every case. I have other examples where there was one global ERP system, but in many cases they had separate ERP systems locally, and they were looking for local on-prem services or on-prem software to be integrated to those ERPs. Those times are disappearing. Those instances are going away, as even the ERP solutions are moving to the cloud. In the next 5 to 10 years, we will see that major companies who have one ERP infrastructure and all the connecting systems will also probably be in the cloud. There are some exceptions, of course, where national security comes into the picture, but those are not really amongst the shared service centers. Maybe some companies who are working in specific industries, maybe in the defense industry, there could be some very sensitive information that's not allowed to be put in the cloud. Other than that, everything is actually going to the cloud. We all know that public cloud is still safer and less expensive on a TCO basis than any on-prem solution, and internet connection quality is less and less of a problem, except that we have lately seen in India, for example, where the pandemic situation caused and is causing severe problems, and people having to work from home, although they are receiving infrastructure from their companies, the internet connection quality is very, very poor in many areas, which makes life very difficult for them to work. As a result, more and more companies and organizations are adopting very, very quickly these cloud technologies. And I could give you miraculous examples from our own country, Hungary, where organizations which you would have never believed would go to the cloud actually went to the cloud already. What is the business impact really? Well, we've heard from Hamish and also from Markus that in some cases systems speak to systems. So I would go even further. I have an old university classmate who actually works for a global German manufacturing and technology development company. They experienced already that for some commodity, which is actually low-cost commodity under a certain value, like, I don't know, maybe 10,000 euros, they have implemented robots to take proposals from suppliers. And in some instances, they realized, or they had the suspicion, that the selling part, the supplier part, was also applying robots to give proposals for such low-value commodity items. And finally, these were set up to a mode they could even negotiate to a certain extent. Would you believe that? So this is robots negotiating with robots. Sounds very crazy, but of course they will not just suddenly wake up and start thinking, but it's crazy, isn't it? What other business impact can this have? Well, what we realized is that cloud solutions are driving the big organizations towards one global subscription contract. And where that subscription contract is signed, for example, for Ariba or BAS or any other solution, usually the implementation contracts are also signed. These global projects are often phased, so it's not in one go. It takes years to implement and roll out globally, which is actually requiring not only internal resources on the customer side, but also continuously available resources on the solution provider side, the implementation side. And luckily, shared services, as we realize, get the opportunity more and more often to actually drive these projects, do the pilot implementation together with the supplier, and then assist the rollout. However, for the growing demand, there is a significant lack of capacity in the Western European area, traditionally strong areas like Germany, UK, France, and other countries, where most of the, and the US, of course, most of the company headquarters are located who actually have shared services in our region. And I'm not even talking about the labor arbitrage, however, that is an important aspect too. This growing demand for global source-to-pay implementations is a business reality, but it can also be an opportunity. How and why? Because the significantly higher mandate rates in the headquarter countries, which can go up to 3 times as higher as in Central Eastern Europe, may actually stop a project being started even because of its huge impact on the financials or worse return on investment opportunities, especially with the pandemic, despite the fact that everyone would like to do the digital transformation. We believe, therefore, there is a win-win opportunity for both parties in case the SSC is in charge. Obviously, as we heard in previous presentations, the SSC or BSC has to have the professional capacity to do such things. But if it has, then there could be a hybrid delivery model where we face a teamwork of a global integrator or consultancy company like EY and the local implementation teams, either regionally or country by country, which can significantly decrease the total cost of the implementation due to the differences in cost, as well as can provide the same level of expertise related to these solutions. About the digital mailroom, we have all heard about the digital mailroom in the past. We all see something in front of our eyes with a lot of traditional paper mail being opened, people de-stitching documents, putting in scanners, etc. Well, this is not the digital mailroom today. This has been reinvented. The digital transformation came across this area as well. It became the virtual front door for information entry for every organization, and also the workshop for transforming the physically outgoing documents into more and more physical digital outgoing documents. And this not only requires OCR technology, it was the old days. Today it's mainly using real artificial intelligence and machine learning with connected workflows and a lot of publicly available resources like neural network blocks or open databases. So when you think about the digital mailroom today, you should think about something modern, which has a lot of technology packed in and has network connections to databases and artificial intelligence working inside. There is less and less people necessary for this. Still, the human interaction helps improve the whole system and service. In these pictures, you can see in the left side the real building where in Gödöllő, 20 kilometers from Budapest, we have our outsourcing center. This is where we actually process all the incoming paper-based or digital documents from mainly Europe, but through our scanning hubs in the United States and through our scanning hubs in Asia, in the Philippines, we also receive documents from Asia and North America. All the brain work is being done here in Hungary, and obviously the result of our work is that fed back into the systems, backend systems, ERPs, workflows, etc., of our global customers. As I said, many of them being shared service centers, business support centers. So where can DOCSIS potentially add value? This is kind of a summary of everything I told you before. We do business consulting related to solution implementations. These are mainly SAP, Ariba, and Basware related, as well as data capture solution related work. Kofax has introduced lately an agile solution for actually combining artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, as well as workflow orchestration into one platform. It's called Total Agility. And this is the highest level of digital transformation support from a technological point of view. But obviously that also needs the maturity of the organization. No system will change the way you actually work. And I fully agree. Every organization should first think how they would like to optimize their work and then adopt a technical solution to it. For this adaptation, we can do the most, and as I said, we are pretty competitive based on experience compared to any Western European or North American company. As well as in the outsourcing, I can also confirm that during the most difficult times of the pandemic here in Hungary, our operations center went 24/7 without any stops. Who would recognize the young gentleman in the middle? I believe probably all of you who have heard about tennis and play or watch tennis. Well, I will help you. This is Roger Federer, the young Roger Federer, next to Jimmy Connors. And he also started somewhere. Before he became the king of tennis, he had to practice at least 6 hours a day over 20 years, and he is still learning new things. And this analogy is also similar to what we experienced as Doxis. We started as a two-man company with the project for Alcoa, automating invoice processing. And today, 16 years later, we are far from being kings, but we have learned a lot through our projects with you, with shared services, and I believe this is what we can actually give back. Key takeaways, and this is my last slide, that we believe, based on experience, that hybrid deployment of global projects, especially in the source-to-pay cloud area, could be highly beneficial for a shared service center or an organization who is actually driving such a project from this geography, where hybrid means a global contractor using local resources to actually create a better return on investment. The other is that near-sourced document data capture services provide higher value than just moving, for example, invoice data capture into a cloud solution or far source it to Asia or other places where labor cost is lower, but infrastructure or quality is not necessarily as good or as expected compared to East and Central Eastern Europe. And well, the last line is a bit of a marketing from our side, that we have proven in the past 10 years that we can actually do both. And now, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
It was loud and clear, of course. No questions.
That's fine. I think my subject was the easiest out of all. My slides were the least complicated or complex slides. So thank you very much for having the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and thank you all our guests as well. And I hope to see everyone on our next panels. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.